Hello and welcome to The Curator on Monocle Radio with me, Fernando, Augusto, Pacheco. Over the next 60 minutes, I'll be bringing you some of the very best content from Monocle Radio in 2024, and that includes interviews with Olympic Games Executive Director Christophe Duby.
If you take a step back and you were looking in January, what could go wrong? Yes, you had a few elements, but it was really, really well designed.
Plus, music from the Staves.
We've had to learn to be a band, learn to work together professionally over the years, and sort of try and unlearn being a family at the same time.
Yeah. All that and much more in the next hour here on The Curator with me, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. And welcome to the second part of our Best of 2024 here on The Curator. In this show, there'll be a lot of content from Paris. Monaco was there when the Olympics were happening, and what a beautiful Olympics that was. Well, so much so that we start talking with the man that designed the Olympic flame and the Olympic cauldron. He's Parisian designer Mathieu Lehaner.
Of course, we wanted to bring a huge emotion for the opening ceremony, and I guess we succeed in a way. But my biggest surprise was actually the day after, because the emotion moments turned to be a kind of pride moment, and I listened from many visitors' message I've received that, wow, we are very proud. We are very proud to have been able to get such a piece that talk about us, that talk about our history, that talk about our culture. So, and yes, as you said, all the tickets have been sold actually in the morning, the day after the opening ceremony. But it's insane to see actually all the people, thousands of people that's just waiting for the rise up of the balloon every single night at 10 p.m.
Were you expecting to create such an emotional response? Because obviously you have to create something that we will not only just be wowed by at that precise moment, but will rest in our brains, in our collective memories of what the beginning of the Olympic Games was like. I mean, it's a big job.
Yes, but after a project has been done, you can rewrite the story. And I could explain that everything was under control, and I wanted to play with this history of Hot Balloon and Montgolfier brother. And of course, I wanted to get the balloon installed in the Tuileries because it makes sense according to the history of this quest.
Just explain to us why the Tuileries is significant for the balloon.
Because actually the Tuileries garden was and is the place where all those inventions that have been done in the history. Actually, the very first balloon, firstly Hot Balloon by Montgolfier brother, but 9 days after this invention from the Montgolfier, a very famous physician called Jacques Charles, a French one, create a hydrogen balloon. And for both of their invention, they test it and they reveal it in the Jardin des Tuileries, exactly where we are. And even almost 100 years after, for the international exhibition, it was the same, it was a helium balloon. So the Tuileries garden is absolutely linked with the balloon. But frankly, I can confess here, I didn't know that. And when I proposed to Joachim this idea of making a flying cauldron, actually to make it fully visible from everywhere, almost everywhere in Paris, I didn't know clearly the history of those inventions, and I discovered into the process, and even into the competition state. I proposed this idea, but I didn't get any idea where we could install it. And we consider several options all around in Paris, but in several locations. And finally, Le Louvre proposed to install the balloon in the Tuileries. And I said, well, why not? Not so bad. And and people told me, but it would be great because of the invention, because of Montgolfier, because of the fission. I said, yes, of course.
Did you have to pretend that you knew?
Of course, it was the idea, but I didn't want it to insist.
We stay in Paris now because we also met Olympic Games Executive Director Christophe Duby.
We're midway through the second week, feeling better and better. Actually, we were in the elevator together with a few of the the Alliance and your people. And I was asking, so how is it for you? Amazing was the answer. When I get this in an elevator, I take it every day.
So, I mean, you went in, I remember watching an interview with you at the beginning of the year in January saying we're extremely confident, these games are incredibly well designed, incredibly well delivered. I mean, that was in January. That was perhaps at a point where people were thinking, okay, how's Paris coping and how's Paris taking all this change? I mean, you needed to sort of like really puff your chest up at the beginning and sort of almost go on a campaign to bring people on side. Did it feel like that?
But you see, it's normal in a venture of this size, this degree of sophistication, that people are asking questions. And yes, it's easy in planning times to point out to what can go wrong. And it's normal to do that. The system has to be pushed to what can go wrong. What goes well, no one will witness, but what can go wrong? From the media to civil society, we get these questions constantly. Thing is, when you take a little bit of a step back, and we have delivered a few games over the last decades, not to that degree of audacious ideas and creativity, but nevertheless, in the main, if you take a step back and you were looking in January, what could go wrong? Yes, you had a few elements, but it was really, really well designed. The main concern that we always had from the final of the Champions League was the integration of security forces. It failed a few years ago for one game, and there we're speaking about 80 to 85 games equivalent every day. And from that moment in time, all efforts were on integration of planning, starting with security forces. And we knew for a long time that there was one person deciding at the end of the chain, and the rest was planning in an integrated fashion. So, no, we had all the markers being green. What we didn't anticipate, though, was this immense popular success that we see today, with stadiums absolutely crowded and the streets being crowded too. This is called managing success, right?
What about the? It is lovely, and and Paris feels special, and Paris feels different, and Paris feels as if it's in a very magical bubble for two weeks, and then we'll have the Paralympic Games after that. What about getting Parisians on side? Because that became one of the famous stories.
Yeah, I'm stunned about the behavior of the Parisians and the acceptance for games which are very disturbant, especially to the center of Paris, right? We had all the security measures prior to the opening ceremony and all these road closures throughout the day. I think one of the explanations why we have the support is that for many Parisians, the game started earlier and delivered goods, especially in Seine-Saint-Denis, but in the schools as well, in the sports club, right before the games, or I would say even a few years prior to the games. Before we're speaking about the legacy of the games, which is always the after 17 days, there they anticipated and delivered some of the programs prior to the games. And I think it really helped in the acceptance of all these measures that are constraints. But in the end, again, from businesses to citizens, they all came together.
Because this was a game that, as has been widely documented, takes place within a bustling, busy capital city, and people had to have their lives changed. You heard people's lives being disturbed, and roads being closed, etc., etc., etc. I mean, that is always going to be part of living in a capital. But we are now hearing reports that the Parisians who fled have been watching on the television, and some have come back. Do you wish they'd fallen in love a little earlier? Their own judgment. I love the fact, and I saw the same reporting that they intend to come back. It happens that I have a good friend of mine. Is a well-known French actor. He's Swiss, but he acts in France. He's away, and he wrote to me yesterday. And said, but I wish I would have stayed. Why didn't I stay? And yes, he's away and he's working, by the way, so he cannot make a comeback. But yes, it's true that I've read the same reports. And falling in love, is it early or late? Point is, when you fall in love, it's the right moment. So if it's now and not before, I'm okay with it. And the fact that we'll see more people in the streets and celebrating the athletes, especially for all these
these events that you can go and watch free of charge. You can go to the Champions Park. You will be able to witness the marathon this weekend. Some will participate in the marathon. So all these things that are available and free, including many of the cultural offering around, will be a very, very busy last 5 days.
You are listening to The Curator on Monocle Radio with me, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. In this show, we have the best interviews and reports from Monocle Radio in 2024. This time, we'll explore sports and film with legendary animator Glenn Keane.
I was taught by my mentor, Ollie Johnston, who, with Walt Disney, they created the look of Disney animation. And he would say, he's an old guy when he was teaching me, Glenn, don't draw what the character is doing. Draw what they're thinking and feeling. And I think that's what I try to capture when I'm drawing. When I was working on Dear Basketball with Kobe, I said, Kobe, for one thing, you've got the worst basketball player on earth animating you. And he says, well, that's good, because everything you're going to learn about basketball is going to be studying him. And I said, yeah, you're right. But look, I've downloaded your top 20 plays, and I need you to tell me what you were thinking and feeling in each one of these moments for me to understand how to animate you. And he just had this photographic memory of every feeling and stories, and it was incredible. So when I'm sitting, like last night, I was sketching the France-Germany basketball game, and I mean, I've never seen such a physical basketball game. I mean, and the drawing I did is these two players pushing against each shoulder, both driving, fighting one another. I mean, there's such drama in this. I mean, as an animator, you're a storyteller, but you do that in your drawing.
And what's interesting there is actually the slight disadvantage of radio is that we could not see that when you were describing the France-Germany basketball match, your body actually took the form of a visceral fighting man. It was astonishing to see. What I quite want to do is take you back in when you see Dear Basketball, this utterly beautiful short film about what drives Kobe Bryant. You illustrate at the top that this little boy who's on his bed and he's using his rolled up socks for a ball, and that's what lights his fire. What's Glenn Keane's rolled up socks moment?
Well, I never remember anything other than wanting to be an artist. I mean, that was what I'd always desired. My dad was a cartoonist. But I knew somehow I wasn't going to be a cartoonist like him. I wanted to be a fine artist. Because one day my dad, when I was like about 7 years old, he said, Glenn, I'm a cartoonist. You're an artist. And it was like being knighted. He gave me a book on dynamic anatomy, and I started drawing the Olympic athletes in that were like the sculptures from Greece. And I was doing these drawings of a discus thrower and a javelin and a sprinter. And I remember getting on the school bus, and I had my sketchbook with me. And all my friends gathered around and were looking at my sketches, and they started laughing. And they said, hey, Keane's drawing naked guys. And you know, at that age, when your friends laugh at what you do, you stop doing it. But because my dad had said, Glenn, you're an artist, it was like, I realized they don't get it. I'm special. I like being an artist. And it just fueled my path. I mean, that was my rolled up socks moment for me.
How much of what you have just described to us is playing out now at the Olympics, where you see athletes with the javelin, with the discus, that moment when the body is at its most extreme and it's most, or arguably its most beautiful?
I think that there's something inside of the human spirit that animates the body. I mean, an animator is somebody who is animating what is inside and is coming out. And the body does impossible, incredible things. I think the key to anything you do is thinking like a child. You just never stop that. Successful athletes, I believe, still think like a child. Children believe that the impossible is possible. And there's nothing better at the end of a game when there is no time left and you still see the fire in the eyes, like, we're not going to give up. I mean, this is the spirit of a child living in an athlete. And I saw that with Kobe. I saw that in the team last night watching that. It's so thrilling.
And how much of that thinking like a child was stitched through your work at Disney? The fact remains is that you were creating beautiful films and beautiful characters essentially for children, although we all know that quite a few more people watch it. But how much every day did you have to say, I'm getting up, I have to think like a child, I have to think like a child?
No, I don't ever think that. It's just the way I am. I mean, you become the character that you animate. Ariel, for example, I created designing and animating her. I was 33 years old, and I remember animating Ariel singing this song, Part of Your World, as she's swimming up, and she's starting to reach for the land. And I thought, this is embarrassing. I'm a 16-year-old mermaid right now, and I'm animating
incredibly pretty 16-year-old mermaid as well.
And I thought, oh gosh, what are people going to think of me? But I couldn't stop Ariel. She swam up and she reached out, and as she's singing Part of Your World, she drifts back down to the bottom of the sea, and it's just desire. And so I animated it, and years later, I was speaking at an animation school, and this young woman comes up to me and said, Mr. Keane, I don't know if you remember this, there's this moment in Little Mermaid where Ariel reaches out, and I said, oh, yeah, no, I remember that. She said, well, I was 4 years old, and I was in the movie theater, and when Ariel reached out and singing this song, Part of Your World, she said, I stood up in the middle of the movie theater, and I reached my hands out to take her hands because she wanted to be part of my world. I was like, thank you, I could kiss you. This is what you want. You want to connect. You want to touch the audience and have them believe, like you do, in the character.
And this year I had the pleasure to speak with many musicians of music that I love, including Toronto-born singer Ellie X, about her new self-produced album, which is heavily influenced by the sounds of the 80s. Eliax, what a pleasure. Welcome to Monocle Radio to talk about your fantastic new album. I loved it. Girl with No Face. But before we talk about some of the themes, about the music, is that the case? The album was self-produced. I mean, that's incredible. That's kind of the first time you did that, right?
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for the kind words. In terms of the self-production, it was the first time I attempted an entire body of work. I had dabbled before, so I'd done my song Bitch, actually, which is the song that I'm known for at this point. That was a self-produced and self-written song. And then there's many songs on Collection 1, 2, and Super Sunset that I had done additional production on, meaning someone else had started the track and then they'd sent me the files and then I'd added my own thing to it. Also, early songs like Prime on Collection 1, I made the demo for that and then passed it off. So I dabbled, but I'd never attempted a full record because I knew it would be a huge challenge and a huge learning curve. So this is the first time.
And precisely because of that, would you say that this is perhaps your most personal album as well?
I would say it's the most me. Yeah, I think when no one else is in the room to sort of influence your choices and your opinions, something that is more you comes out for sure.
I was reading, I think you said also, I always need a bit of camp. I love that because I agree wholeheartedly. And one of my favorite singles of the album is Off With Her Tits. I think, I don't know. Yes. I mean, the beat is amazing. The lyrics. What can you tell us a bit more? And perhaps explain what do you mean when you say you always need a bit of camp?
I think it's in my personality very much. And to be honest, my best friends always have this quality as well, where there's this real acknowledgement of the darkness and the pain of existing as a human on planet Earth.
Yes.
But there is a humor that is used to express it. And my dad's from the UK, and it's also a very British thing, I think. Not taking anything that seriously, always taking the piss out of everyone. Like, I really relate to that style of humor. And so Off of the Tits is, I think it's very that.
Go take the piss, I'm black with a whip, not soft full of shit, now off the tits. Off the tits. Off the tits.
I love it. It's definitely one of my favorites. And I have to be honest, that album, it's very danceable. I mean, you can see the 80s influence. It feels very hedonistic at the same time, even compared with your previous album. What was your state of mind when you were making this album? Was that your intention? Because I love that. I mean, it's not an album for ballads, let's be honest here.
No, there's one sort of ballad on there. But yeah, it's an album that's pretty upbeat, more danceable than my last records. I'm not really hitting the BPMs that actually make it like a club album, but it is danceable. And it's indulgent. I keep saying that. Like, I just allowed myself to indulge in all my favorite sounds and all my favorite genres and references. And I think the 80s definitely was a very hedonistic time. And there was all this new equipment that was happening and all this experimentation. And I think that was a time where people were really indulging. And so just by virtue of me referencing the 80s and the late 70s, I think that comes through as well.
Always your whole career you had the goth influences as well, but this one I felt, as you mentioned, the 80s, a little bit of Human League here and there, some Italo disco as well, you know, kind of that bass as well. I think those, I can definitely see that in the album. Yeah,
for sure. That's my personal favorite time in music, so I just let myself. And I did something else with this album that I'd never tried fully before, which is I kept it pretty much exclusively analog. Like, I didn't use plugins really, with a few minor exceptions, but mostly I was programming MIDI and sending it to drum machines and synths. And that was super fun. And I think makes it sound pretty authentically of that time as well.
No, it sounds incredible. And Ellie, if you don't mind me saying this on air as well, because you do have some sort of a connection with my home city, São Paulo. I love that. So I wonder if you can tell us a bit more. I actually didn't know that before I was chatting with you today.
Yeah, well, I mean, I brought it up before the interview because I generally don't talk about my relationship, but I am with someone who's from São Paulo, and we've been together quite a long time. And he's involved in this album too, actually, is the only co-writer. So yeah, that's the tie to São Paulo.
And as always this year, I've been hosting the Global Countdown, where I look at the top 5 songs in different countries. This episode was a special one. I did it straight after Switzerland's victory at this year's Eurovision Song Contest. I decided to look at the all-time greatest Swiss songs.
Time now for the Global Countdown with Fernando, Augusto, Pacheco. Faye, we're doing something a little different today.
You know, Eurovision just happened on Saturday. Switzerland won for the 3rd time ever. A very well-deserved victory for Nemo, the Swiss entry. So I've decided, Georgina, to look at the best-selling, most popular Swiss singles from Swiss artists at the Swiss charts. And it's interesting because, I like to look at the charts every week. There are not many Swiss artists even in their own charts. So I wonder if Nemo's victory could help, actually, a little bit the music industry in the country. And here we're going to remind that there are some great Swiss artists out there. But I think we should start with Nemo.
Well, just before we do, can I just query his name? Is it Nemo as in finding, the clownfish, or is it Nemo as in Nemo me impune licessit, the Latin phrase, no one provokes me with impunity?
Probably the second one. I am not 100% confirmed with that, but it's kind of cute if it was the first one as well. Some of the Swiss newspapers, they had a little bit of fun with the headlines. Europe finally found Nemo, which we're going to listen to it right now.
That's where I found my kingdom come. My heart beats like a drum.
Nemo connected with people, Georgina. This song is operatic. There's a little bit of hip-hop, drumming, bass. Clearly, Nemo is a very talented musician here.
I mean, that just had all the Eurovision tick boxes, didn't it? The key change, everything. I mean,
great staging.
Yeah.
That disc there. I mean, I wouldn't be able to do it. I would feel a little bit dizzy.
But you were there watching it, weren't you?
It was quite impressive. Well deserved for Nemo.
What was the atmosphere like?
Well, I've been saying here it was tense outside the arena because of all the controversies, the Dutch disqualification, a lot of people disagreeing about Israel being there. But I have to say, Georgina, in the end, people were happy. And I think Sweden did well. It was a very complicated Eurovision to host. But I think in the end, there were no casualties. There were no other issues. But I think the EBU is having a lot of meetings at the moment, as we speak, to see how they're going to handle it.
Back to Switzerland.
Yes.
Right. So if Nemo's your number 5, who is your number 4?
We're going back to 1977. And this song was actually an Eurovision entry. But it was only the 6th place at that year. But it became one of the biggest hits in Switzerland ever. It's very fun. There's a little bit of Schlager in there. It's a Pepe Leinhardt band with Swiss Lady.
Spielt der Rock'n'Roll, spielt der Dixieland und war bekannt als die One-Man-Mountain-Band. Sagte, durch sie allein ist die Welt voll Musik. Sie gibt mir alles und vergisst mich nie. Sie ist meine Swiss Lady und ich ein Mann aus den Bergen.
You were asking me what's Schlager. That's exactly what you just did, Georgina.
Well,
that little
German dance there.
That little German dance. Or Swiss dance in this case. And Pepe's still going on. He's 78 years old now. And he's kind of a band leader. There's a group of 6 of them. But Swiss Lady was a massive hit. It's an homage to his country and to all Swiss ladies out there.
Who have you got at number 3?
Number 3, that's a more recent one. That was from 2018. And this song was on the top of the Swiss charts for 21 weeks. That's an impressive number. It's a rap duo from Bern. I mean, I say rap. I mean, you're going to hear it. It's not, Shall we have a listen, actually?
Absolutely.
It's Low and Leduc with 079. And as with any kind of popular song, there's some controversies to it as well. I was reading some articles trying to say, why 079? Apparently this song is about a man that keeps insisting, asking a woman for her phone number. But he's very insistent. I mean, he keeps on asking. And some people are saying, wow, he's a bit of a stalker. I mean, is this song cool or not? So there was a lot of discussion in Switzerland at the time. Nevertheless, one of the biggest hits in Switzerland's history.
Now, the next one, is it about a ridiculously small dog or a place in, I think, Mexico?
I think it's about the dog. It's the lovely chihuahuas. I mean, this song, Georgina, it was not a hit only in Switzerland. It was, I believe, number 1 in Spain, in France. It was even on the advert for Coca-Cola in France as well. There was a Brazilian version of that song called My Little Dog, Chihuahua, but singing in Portuguese. It was everywhere. It was for kids, for adults. It is, of course, DJ Bobo, who is a bit of a Swiss legend. He's a music producer. He raps at times. But shall we have a listen to Chihuahua,
Yes.
one of the biggest hits ever from Switzerland? I gotcha.
Chihuahua.
Chihuahua. I mean, I love it. I love the silliness of DJ Bobo, and we should never underestimate DJ Bobo. And I think there's a little bit of a segue here, if you don't mind, because we have more DJ Bobo. I've spoke to some of my Swiss friends. Some of them are a bit embarrassed, and I don't think they should be, because, DJ Bobo, he has been an Eurovision entry for Switzerland. I think he's the best-selling Swiss artist of all time. So next year, when the event's going to be in Switzerland, I guarantee you that he will be there. And he's going on a tour as well, starting in August. And guess his first tour, where is it going to be? In São Paulo, my hometown. That just shows how international he is. And then he's heading to Santiago, to Poland. But at number one, that song was everywhere in 1993. It is another classic by DJ Bobo, Somebody Dance With Me.
Like round and round, upside down, living more life till your feet on the ground. Then put your hands up in the air, wave like you just don't care. And if you're ready to rock, then rock with me. Somebody say, oh yeah, oh yeah, ow.
As our producer, who is in fact the musician Paige B, has just said, it's hardly Whitney Houston.
It's not Whitney Houston, but, it's hard to compete with her voice as well. But, he does have some great rhymes in Chihuahua as well. And if I may recommend, you should go back to his old catalog. He had 27 hits in Switzerland. One of my favorites is Everybody. Everybody sing a song. I'm not going to sing. I think we should ask for our producer Paige. She has a much better voice than me. But well done, DJ Bobo.
Absolutely. A double dose of DJ Bobo there. My cup runneth over, and I'm so glad you've told me there are 27 more that I can subject myself to. Fernando, Augusto, Pacheco, thank you very much indeed.
UBS has over 900 investment analysts from over 100 different countries.
Over 900 of the sharpest minds and freshest thinkers in the world of finance today.
To find out how we could help you,
contact us at ubs.com.
And we're back with the curator. Now a highlight from the stack. We spoke with the editor-in-chief of Brazil's largest daily newspaper, Folha de São Paulo, on the paper's redesign and its coverage of the US election.
I came to London for two events. The main one was an international seminar that we held with our sister company, UOL. It's the largest portal in Latin America. And with LIDE, which is a non-government group that promotes this kind of events. And the second one is a meeting, a speech I did in Oxford at the Reuters Institute for Journalism. I spoke to fellow journalists from all over the world about what are the main issues regarding Brazilian journalism right now.
That's very interesting. And talking about Brazilian journalism, your newspaper, I've been reading since as a kid. I feel it's very innovative. Very recently, you had a completely redesign of the newspaper. That's actually quite a big deal. I wonder, what can you tell us about it?
Yeah, well, we have this, what we call jokingly, half seriously, we have the tradition of rupture, tradition of breaking rules, which is a paradox, but it's how we see Folha. And every 5 or so years, we like to revamp the newspaper without losing its essence, of course, without losing what makes Folha. So the time had come and we decided to do a major graphic redesign and visual redesign. And when we were doing that with an office that we hired from former Folha designers that went to have their own office, design office, we start thinking, let's try different formats, not just the design, but formats as well. Until then, we were a broadsheet newspaper. So we started doing a tabloid version, a Berliner version, and other kinds of version. And the Berliner was like revelation for us. We thought, well, that's what Folha was supposed to be in this moment. And why don't we do that? Then we start to look at printing facilities that would do that for us, because Folha has a printing facility that does broadsheet. And we found this sister company as well that would do the Berliner version of Folha for us for a reasonable pricing in terms of budget. It was in the budget to do that. The Berliner version of Folha started to be the goal. It wasn't the goal at first, and it became the goal to be the new version of Folha.
I was in Brazil recently and I wanted to check it out, as a reader. My main fear was like, oh, will they lose content? Will there be less pages? That's always the first worry. But in a way, it was actually the opposite. It feels to me that the paper is fatter, if I may say that. There's even more content.
Yeah, it's 20% more content than the old version. And it's around 40% more content than our main local competitor. So that was one of the norths that we had. We can't offer less content for our readership. Because when you change, the reader is a creature of habits, right? When you change something, you have to give something in return. Otherwise, it's a bad situation for the reader. So we thought we are, in a way, delivering a smaller version of what the reader was used to. So we have to deliver more. That was one of the things that we had very clearly since the beginning. And we did the first week and we compared with the last week of the old version, and it's 20% consistently more content. And we compare the new version with our main local competitor, it's 40% more than what they offer. So far we are doing great.
And of course, I was there for the first round of the Brazilian municipal elections. I bought Folha the next day. The graphics in the newspaper, they are impressive. You have an amazing kind of graphic team as well, because then you could detail how the whole of Brazil voted. There was a lot of color. It was very easy to understand the stories. How important is those graphics for the brand, for Folha de São Paulo?
It's so important that we have a very strong graphic team doing this kind of art, but then there's a spin-off from the graphic team that now it's its own team, its own section. It's called Delta Folha, that it's journalism heavily based on data. Mm-hmm. So what they do is they delve on all sources of information that are rough, and they translate in a visual way to our reader. That's what they do. This map you referred to, it was done by this team. I think they are thriving right now. Well, I'm biased, of course, and I suspect you are a little bit biased as well. But but I think they are doing a great job.
You are listening to The Curator, weekly highlight show here on Monocle Radio. Notre Dame has served as the setting for the coronation of almost 30 French kings. In 2019, a devastating fire engulfed the cathedral, and now it's been reopened. But let's find out more about its history.
Welcome to arguably the world's most beautiful building site. Fenced off from tourists, but with the work in full view of the world, Notre Dame and her restoration is taking centre stage in the heart of Paris. Powerful, elegant and eternal. You'd never guess that one day, 5 years ago, one of the West's greatest examples of civilization was within a matter of moments of being engulfed by flames forever. The French journalist Agnès Poirier was in her room, about 50 metres from Notre Dame, and she saw the devastation unfold.
Well, it was tragic and yet magnificent in the sense that people were just rooted on the ground like statues. I saw some huge yellow-brown plumes of smokes really from my kitchen window, and I knew something massive was happening. The tongues of fire coming out of the roof, and there were no firemen at that time, were so huge. It felt like you were looking at a Renaissance painting. So the moment was sublime and yet absolutely terrible.
The brothers Gédéon and Jules Naudet made their names when they captured the first plane striking the North Tower of the World Trade Center on 9/11. Now, disaster was unfolding in their home city.
You could see it in the faces of everyone around the world. That cry of anguish when the steeple fell, it was, I think, echoing something inside of us at a moment where almost everything was changing. Everything were losing kind of grasp on things we had taken for granted or things the world changing around the world.
The motto of Paris firefighters is to save or to die, and never had that expression held more meaning than on the 25th of April 2019. Because at 9:30 in the evening, 150 firefighters went into the building, knowing they may never come out. The authorization had come from President Macron himself.
I talked to General Gallet, who was the chief commander of the fire brigade in Paris, and he said the situation was so desperate. Audacity was the only response to it. And what happened is that he sent a sort of vanguard of 50 firemen up the North Tower, because the North Tower was already being eaten alive by the fire, and there are 8 bells there. And if the 8 bells had collapsed, the North Tower would have collapsed onto the South Belfry, which also has 2 enormous bells. One is the lowest pitched bell in the world, Emmanuel, it's called. And then basically the whole edifice would have collapsed like a house of cards.
The Naudet brothers made a documentary about the firefighters' efforts.
If the firefighters of Paris had not been at the right time, at the right place, sending this kind of suicide commando to extinguish the fire in a particular place, then yes, Notre Dame would not be here today. And those firefighters that were sent had all agreed and accepted the fact that they might not come back from this particular mission, but they succeeded.
Back on the Quai de Tournelle, I asked Agnès Poirier what might have been had the building not been saved.
It's impossible to fathom, to even contemplate, to imagine. You know, the loss of Notre Dame, it's like imagine the loss of the pyramids in Egypt, or the loss of the Great Wall of China, or the loss of the Colosseum in Rome. It's something that the human mind cannot contemplate.
Within days, the stakes had been raised. The construction would have a time limit of 5 years. Agnès Poirier has been following the stories of those charged with the reconstruction. It's been set up like a military operation.
They are the best artisans in France. 1,000 of them are working every day, about 400 or 500 on site every day. When they say, okay, today we can do this, there's too much wind, we can't do this, it's too cold or it's raining, we cannot do this, but we can do other things. And so it's really a question, the pressure of time is a question of logistics rather than rushing your gargoyle, if you like, or your restoration. This is done properly.
What does it feel like when you're inside this? Because it is a building site, but it is an incredibly precious one.
The day I went, it was pouring with rain. Another day I went, it was 38 degrees. And people are beaming. And I think something very special is happening there, simply because, I mean, I tried to pierce that secret, asking people, I said, you know, are you practicing Catholic? Is it something to do with God? And they said, no. I mean, a lot of them were Muslims or Jewish or atheist. And they said, no, this is about the beauty of Notre Dame. This is the chance of a lifetime.
And it's created a family, a musical one.
Do you know what? The artisans, all, you know, very different ones, they have created a choir. and they've taken to singing, and they will be singing on the 11th of December, and a lot of them were laughing because they had never sung in their lives. But there is the Artisans Choir, and apparently they're having a lot of fun.
The scaffolding will still be there, but the doors will open on the 8th of December 2024 at 11:30 a.m. for worship. For Monocle in Paris, I'm Emma Nelson.
And we like to end the curator with some music. Jessica and Camilla Stavely-Taylor, the sisters behind English indie folk band The Staves, joined Robert Bound in the studio. Their John Congleton-produced fifth LP, All Now, is lyrically rich and full of moments of euphoria. They discuss how to work with your siblings, finding the confidence to make bold decisions, and why they always return to an early influence, Sister Act.
I'm the curse, I'm the cure, the solution. I'm the reality and the illusion. I'm a kid, I'm a friend, I'm a teacher. I'm the object in the distance, but you'll never reach her. Oh, oh, oh.
That was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And congratulations on the wonderful All Now.
Yeah.
Out now. It's wonderful stuff. It's a wonderful record. It has got a kind of folky quality. It's got a sort of straight down the line, propulsive, horizon chasing quality at times. At what point in the songwriting process do you decide on vibe, on how many rocky numbers, how many confessional close to the mic things we're going to hear? At what point? Does it start out like that, or does it become apparent once you've got some songs in the bank, as it were?
I think that as more songs are written, the treatment for each song becomes quite apparent. But I think you usually know once you begin writing a song, there's either like a really strong vision or there's just a kind of instinct of how it's going to go.
But then in terms of like a group of songs, I think sometimes it ends up just presenting itself.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of like an album.
You go, okay, we need to start a bit fast, get people's, grab people. Yeah. What do you use, a lasso?
Yeah.
Sort of small fishing net like a child might use in a paddling pool?
Exactly.
Not a paddling pool, a rock pool.
A rock pool.
Well, All Now felt like it had to be the first song. It's the title track of the album.
Yeah.
And it feels like a new beginning. It feels very much like the beginning of something as you start to listen to the intro to that song.
And it says Happy New Year in it. I love that.
Yeah.
That so should have been everyone's alarm clock on the 1st of January this year.
I know.
Maybe next year.
Maybe next year. Yeah, exactly. Once you've taken it out on the road, people will be familiar with that record. People will be familiar with the album as a whole. They'll be singing it back to you.
We'll be there singing it on the top of Big Ben, I imagine.
I imagine we'll be invited to do that.
This year. Yeah.
Okay. Because it's at Buckingham Palace or Big Ben or kind of maybe going round on the London Eye. Just as it strikes midnight, ding, then there's you going, Happy New Year. And then, I won't sing your lyrics back to you in a small room like this. You've done too well to deserve that. But yeah, there is a sense of kind of new beginnings with this. Fans of yours will obviously realise that you've been a 3-piece, you're now a 2-piece. Your sister Emily has gone off and had a baby. Congratulations. It's a bit late, isn't it? But nonetheless, and congratulations on All Now. So did she contribute to the songwriting? I think she contributed to some of the vocals and things. How did that work?
Yeah, she's actually had her second baby. So she is taking a break from the Staves for now. And on the last record, she wasn't touring. She'd had her first child then. So we're quite used to it being the two of us that are kind of behind the scenes doing the stuff. But it was obviously still sort of worth explaining it to people.
Yeah.
And I think that it's kind of understanding that even though we're sisters, you know, we're bound by blood, it's also okay if people want to do their own thing. And
exactly.
It's sort of learning that the Staves can be a kind of flexible entity, and who knows what's going to happen for the next record. We're just kind of taking it step by step. But this was the first record that she wasn't involved in the songwriting process, and that's the first time we've properly done that together, just as a duo.
New for us.
Yeah,
it just being us two, and it was interesting becoming accustomed to that new dynamic because it's strange when you our family and have that dynamic of being three of you and the hierarchy, or the ever-shifting hierarchy, and then
glad you said that, not me.
Yeah. And then going into work together, where that dynamic carries through, but then there's also work dynamic, and we've got used to it being three for a really long time. And then, in terms of writing and it just being us two, it was really, really fun and interesting, and it felt like, it felt kind of refreshingly new, not scary new. I think we tried to let it not be a scary thing and really embrace the change.
Did you find, in terms of your songwriting partnership, did it strengthen that, and has it actually strengthened your friendship as sisters, your sibling relationship?
It has, definitely.
Because your songs have always had a beautiful honesty to them, the subject matter. I feel like they're records that look you in the eye as they're speaking to you. You know, they are much beloved for their honesty, I suppose, as well. And that's doing that stuff between two mates that met in a pub and now make records together is different, clearly, to when you're sisters, and you've obviously got a lot of shared ground emotionally that you're perhaps writing songs about.
Yeah, I think it helps with a sort of, there's an understood language there, or whatever the way of describing it would be, where we often get what each other is saying without having to really explain it. But, we've had to learn to be a band, learn to work together professionally over the years, and sort of try and unlearn being a family at the same time.
And that's all we've got time for this week's edition of The Curator. The show was produced by David Stevens and presented by me, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Join us again next week, and thank you for listening.